I'm Mangino. Welcome to the Mangino Talks podcast. We talk about everything that matters to Pittsburgh, from current events to Pittsburgh history, social issues to sports, politics to practical day-to-day life. And you may have heard the news about Allegheny County Council voting to raise the minimum wage for county employees. Wages that were already going to go up to $18 an hour for full-time workers, according to Allegheny County Executive Rich Fitzgerald in a comment he made not too long ago. But what they voted for in a 10-4 vote that is enough to override any potential veto from the county executive is to raise the wages to $18 an hour for everybody. Whether we're talking about full or part-time, permanent or seasonal, it's $18 an hour next year. It's going to go up to $19 an hour in 25 and $20 an hour in 26. There's a lot of argument back and forth about whether or not the council has the authority legally to make this move, or is this something that's completely under the purview of the Allegheny County executive? There's a legitimate argument that you may have to raise wages in order to attract employees, considering the latest numbers out of the county say that there are over 1,600 jobs that are currently open. Are they unable to fill those jobs because they're not paying enough in wages? Potentially. But do you establish a floor for everyone of that significant of a wage? And what's it going to cost us all as taxpayers? The estimate out of the budget office is as high as $30 million. And then you have to ask yourself, is that just for immediate costs? What about the impact to pensions down the road? And can we afford that kind of money? Are we going to have to see a tax increase as a result of all of that? There's a lot to go over. And with us right now is Sam DeMarco. He's Allegheny County Councilman at large, and he joins us on Mangino Talks. And Sam, welcome. Good to have you on.
Thanks for having me, Mangino. Happy to be here.
Thank you very much. Now, this is a big issue. I mean, there are legal issues that are at play here, obviously philosophical ones, but really economic ones that affect everyone in Allegheny County. How are you seeing it at this point?
Well, you did a great job in the setup to this discussion here in talking about what was at stake, okay? Not just what County Council did yesterday, not just the administration's response in that this would necessitate a tax increase of up to $30 million or more, okay? How it would affect future collective bargaining agreements with our other unions. But also, I think what's in question is the separation of powers here, and what is indeed the jurisdiction or purview of the county executive and that of county council. Now, we in the lead up to this, we heard from both solicitors, the county solicitor who said they felt that this violated the law in two areas, felt it was outside the charter, in regards to the county executive being the one responsible for managing this, and then also violated Pennsylvania labor law. The county council solicitor, he had responded and said that he thought that we were able to do this, but I didn't. I found his logic not to my satisfaction, his opinion. So, I tend to believe the administration, who is much more in tune with where the money in our budget is being spent, how it's being allocated, and what the potential costs would be, okay? Mm-hmm. And a couple things here. It's not about raising a minimum wage, because the concept of that, folks think of the minimum wage in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania being $7.25 and that being low. They're absolutely right. But the market has responded. And that's why you heard a member of council talk about, folks that cheats, being offered jobs, $14 to $16 an hour. Mm-hmm. We've hired, when we needed 162, we've hired over 180 lifeguards. And head lifeguards are making over $18 an hour, okay? So the market does work and respond and doesn't need legislation or ordinances from a part-time body, which is what county council is, mm-hmm. Without regard to the impact that those decisions will make. And at the same meeting last night, we heard from folks talking about this. We also heard people talking about, the homeless and the need to maintain shelters and, folks with mental illness and substance abuse and things of that nature. So the county is, we're always looking for more resources. So, I think that, we're best serving the taxpayers when we take the opportunity to review the needs out there and target the available monies we have to where it gets spent. And in regards to our labor pool, when we negotiate with negotiated collective bargaining agreement with a union, there's a pool or a pot of money that you have. And you can spend it in a number of different ways, but you can't go outside the pot. So you can apply it toward wages. You can apply it toward keeping the employee's share of health care down. You can employ it toward their pensions and things of that nature. But, there's only so much to go around. So county council indiscriminately coming in and weighing in and saying, we're just going to change the minimum wage, period, to all county employees without regard, seasonal, part-time, to $20 an hour, is, it's not just without their purview, but I think it's borderline reckless, okay? And when you talk about the county and they're saying, hey, we're going to have a $30 million tax increase required because of things called compression costs. Let me give you some sort of understanding about what we're talking about there. Okay. And when you raise the floor just to $20 an hour, you're saying that if I hire somebody off the street day one, I need to take and pay them $20 an hour. Okay. Well, typically when you go into something, let's say you're a cashier, you come in as a cashier from day one to the 6-month mark, you're entry level. Okay. So you're getting paid X. But at 6 months, you've gotten better at that job. Your skills have improved. You get a raise. You get that bump. Okay. Then after that's maybe it's in a year or 18 months. Now all of a sudden you're senior at that position, still doing the same job, but your responsibilities may have increased. You can provide training for others and things of that nature. So you get another bump. What they've done is they've not just raised the minimum wage to $20 an hour, but they're going to cost us a significant amount of money in having to address all of these other positions that with the starting cost being raised, all these other costs are going to have to go up as well.
All right, so you're
and
going
in addition,
go ahead.
Sorry. In addition, all the collective bargaining agreements we have with our other workers, you have folks out there that have master's degrees, bachelor's, master's degrees. You have folks that are skilled, that are electricians, plumbers, carpenters, things of that nature. Now all of a sudden, you've raised people, the minimum floor for people with basically no skills.
Right.
Okay, entry-level folks, much closer to them, so they're going to demand more because they believe that their skills, deserve more. Okay, and how do you tell them that they don't?
Right.
So these, again, a part-time body acted, in my opinion, in a reckless fashion yesterday, and trying to take and do something again just to, out of spite, to attack the county executive.
Yeah, I don't understand where they think the money is going to come from. And to your point about establishing that $20 an hour minimum wage, you're looking at what, $40,000 a year entry level to get somebody in the door for every possible job that would be full time. It's hard to imagine that in the private sector that is the floor that's established. I get the idea of wanting to play to market forces, and we talked about that, and you mentioned it just a moment ago with Sheets. I get that idea, and you leave the executive branch the authority and the ability to target that as it's necessary and then keep the cost as low as they can. One council member saying that there is an obligation that they have to all of the residents of Allegheny County, and I would agree with that. But, Sam, it would seem to me that the primary obligation is not to raise the wages arbitrarily for some, but to keep the taxes down for all.
Exactly. And, this is the great part about this. I mean, I sit on that body, and sometimes I just want to beat my head, off the desk. They talk about the responsibility to all of the people in Allegheny County. Well, let's talk about the taxpayers. Let's talk about the elderly population we have, about 225,000 of which are living on fixed incomes. Okay? And so these people are suffering from the same market forces out there in regards to inflation and the cost of goods and everything else. but we're going to take and tell them that we're going to raise their taxes because we've indiscriminately decided we're going to take and raise the wage for people, for workers. Again, not just to a good wage. $18 an hour is pretty good, but no, we're going to make it 20.
Mm-hmm.
Because we want to virtue signal with someone else's money. And I think it's important to understand that you have people in that body that haven't paid their own taxes.
Wow.
You have a county councilwoman on there that's owed over $56,000 in unpaid taxes and fees. Yes, you can Google it. Okay.
Right. Okay.
You got another county councilwoman that hadn't paid her real estate taxes until I called her out right before the election, and she paid them on May 10th. Past the due date for the county, and that was the sponsor of that legislation. I brought up one of the other things here. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I brought up yesterday the assessments. Right now it's been front and center in the news to talk about the CLR, the common level ratio, and how it has been too high, and the people who have bought property in the county since 2012 may have been paying far more for taxes than necessary. So we extended earlier this year the appeal window for folks to apply, and we're looking at legislation to try to take and allow even more folks to appeal their assessments if they believe that they're paying more than they should be. Okay. Now, so what's going to happen is when the new rate comes and it's certified by the state, these appeals are going to be automatically decided at that lower CLR. So our tax revenue, the majority of the tax revenue Allegheny County receives, comes in the form of real estate taxes. So we're going to see a revenue decrease, because of those lower assessments. Mm-hmm. Then my concern is you look at downtown Pittsburgh and all the problems. And Mangino, you've done a great job, on your show, illustrating and talking about many of the challenges we have in downtown Pittsburgh, and people coming back to work or the lack of. Mm-hmm. So we have the vacancy rates, okay? And now in City of Pittsburgh right now is running at about 23.4% as of April with a vacancy rate. I'm worried about some of these commercial buildings that are unable to fill their buildings or the occupancy has dropped, mm-hmm. coming back and applying for assessment appeals to have their assessments reduced. And what I fear is some of these which may have traded hands, in recent years, falling below the value of the building, what they owe, and would we potentially be some defaults. Wow. So we are in a precarious situation where we don't know until this thing settles out, mm-hmm. what we can fully expect on a regular basis from our real estate tax revenue. And yet these people are increasing costs here. Now, on a regular basis every year, our costs increase, internal costs increase in the net range of over $20 to $25 million a year. And that's because of the 32 unions we do have. The bump in pay, collective bargaining agreements they get, we have a natural increase in cost. So we've had to scramble every year. Rich Fitzgerald was very proud of the fact that for 21 of the last 22 years, he hasn't had to raise property taxes, but that's been because we've been able to attract business and investment to the region, and it's even giving learners and things like that breaks to developers as those properties come onto the tax rolls. We've received more and more revenue, but we run the risk of that changing. So we don't know what our future financial situation is going to be. Right. At the same time, we're seeing this increased demand for mental health services and the homeless and things like that. And again, we have members of county council sitting up there virtue signaling with somebody else's money to tell folks that, hey, listen, we owe it to our people, to raise the minimum wage to $20 an hour for county employees. Again, look, I'm pro-taxpayer, and I think that that's who we're elected to represent, first and foremost.
And I think you make a valid point in that you have forces that are in some ways beyond the control of county council members or even the county executive about what's happening downtown and the possible appeals that would come from some of those property owners and what that could mean. And then the increased costs that are associated with social services for those that are in need of them. So you couple that together, fewer dollars coming in, greater expenditures going out, the possibility of needing to raise millage, raise taxes. Does that not then compel even more people to decide to then move to Butler County, Beaver County, Washington County, Westmoreland County, and then further strain the economic situation for the county.
Well, absolutely. And Mangino, you're seeing that. And in the past 6 months, you've seen a number of businesses come out in public and announce that they were looking to move away from the city, or at least from the downtown area, okay, because of the crime and the other things that were affecting it. The closing of the Smithfield shelter, this is something that's supported by all of the entities down there. Right now, it's gathering a lot of steam with the activists. But where have they been for the last 17 years?
Mm-hmm.
When for every year since 2006, this shelter is typically closed because it doesn't have the ability to provide polling and stuff like that in the March timeframe, right? And I had a conversation with administration last week, and they had identified about 125 people that typically spend a few days a month there, and they'd already found beds in our system for over 100 of them. Okay,
nice.
So look, I believe that we need to be able to provide a safety net for our folks, but that doesn't mean we need to turn the golden triangle over to them. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
And we can't have the open air drug markets.
Right.
These people are being preyed on by drug dealers and other criminals and things like that. There's a way to do this, but a part-time body like county council, I'm sorry, I serve on it, but we just don't have the skills or the expertise or the experience in these matters to sit there and make the determinations. I mean, Aaron Dalton, who's the head of human services, knows far more about this than any of the people sitting up on the dais of county council, okay? But you don't see them talking to these folks. I spent a lot of time, I was on the phone with a council member from Culver City, California last week, asking what are they doing about homeless, because I had read that these folks had done a great job, and he gave me a number of suggestions and things like this. I don't know that another single council member there is taking the time to do any of this.
Good point.
They just want to attack the administration and the county executive, and so look, at the end of the day here, we talk about, it's all about politics, okay? But when you're elected, you're there to serve. And you can't allow personal animosity to get in the way, where your sole objective seems to be whatever I can do to put the screws to the county executive, on his way out the door.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned a couple of really important things, and I want to let people know about this issue of the homelessness and that we're dealing with in Pittsburgh. I had Executive Director of Light of Life Rescue Mission, Gerald Gilliam, on my podcast, and we were talking about what we do right now that's actually making it worse. That we actually have policies that are in place under the guidance of we're helping and we're compounding the problems because of that virtue signaling that you were talking about earlier. I want to get to a couple of things, and if anybody wants to, they can go back and listen to that podcast once again. It was on May 25th, Executive Director of Light of Life Rescue Mission, Gerald Gilliam, on homelessness. One of the things that was brought up regarding the issue of minimum wage and why it's important to raise the minimum wage in the county was made by Councilman Paul Klein. And he said here in a quote, "There's this expectation that when you serve the public, you at the same time decide to take a vow of poverty." Your reaction to that quote?
I mean, look, it's hyperbole from the council member, and I'm not surprised. I mean, he frequently does this. He's an expert at straw man arguments. Okay. Again, I don't think a lifeguard getting paid $18.50 an hour that's a part-time seasonal role, okay, while they're working their way through college or whatever,
right,
is in any way a vow of poverty, okay? You hear them talk about a living wage, okay? No one's saying that every single job out there needs to pay what they call a living wage.
Well, it seems as though they think that way.
Well, they do, but again, they're virtue signaling with someone else's money. Okay, it's not their own. There's nothing that stops them from taking and donating money or working or volunteering at these shelters or wherever, or trying to help the people that they claim they want to help. But no, they just want to take, it's easy for them to sit there and say, well, we need to spend this.
Mm-hmm.
They pass it, then they go home, they read a nice clip about them in the newspaper, they feel good about themselves for a day or so, get a couple emails, and off they go, you know. And, you know, the people that are going to be forced out of their homes, you know, you have, and I'll just briefly, you'll have folks, the Democratic nominee for county executive is pushing for a countywide reassessment. Okay. You have people that live in homes like in Lawrenceville, you know, that may have lived there for 40 years, but now with recent home prices just soaring and some sort of reassessments, they could be forced out of their homes. We're talking about seniors on fixed incomes, okay, that are forced to choose now between food and medication and things like that. But no, let's just ask them to pay more in taxes because of a vote that we took at county council.
Sam, maybe a couple of them are thinking that these seniors can go the same route that they've gone and just not pay.
You know, hey, it could be. And to me, you know, that's the height of hypocrisy. I mean, look, you know, hey, if you're not paying your way, then recuse yourself from that vote. Okay, but to sit there and spend the taxpayers' money while you weren't pulling your end of the bargain is, you know, again, height of hypocrisy.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me ask you this: one of the arguments is that even if the budget office is right in saying that this could cost upwards of $30 million a year, the thought is, well, what's that when you have a budget that last year alone was about $1 billion? We're talking about a drop, they would argue. How do you respond to that?
Well, you respond to them, again, the people that say this demonstrate their lack of understanding or comprehension of how to manage any type of entity. You don't just build $30 million of margin into your budget. So that money is being spent somewhere, okay? So you have a couple choices. I either got to raise taxes $30 million, or I have to raise the employees' health care, their share of the health care expenses to recoup the money being spent on the wages, or I have to lay off or not fill positions, you know, in which that money was budgeted or allocated for. But you don't have the ability just to print it like they do with the federal government, or go outside on a tree and pick it, because as our parents told us, Mangino, you know, money doesn't grow on trees when we were growing up.
Absolutely. Sam DeMarco joining us. He is Allegheny County Council member at large, and we're talking about raising the minimum wage, a vote that was 10-4 in favor of this. It is a veto-proof number. Do you anticipate that the county executive is going to veto this? And do you think that the 10 that voted for it initially, all of them are willing to stand by that potential veto override vote to move this thing forward?
Well, there's the question, Mangino, and it's a great one. You know, if the county executive vetoes this, and I would urge him to do so, you know, can he pick off one of those 10 to find a sixth member to join the 5 who've opposed it, you know, to uphold the veto? Failing that, I would urge him to take it to court, you know, to once and for all sort of define what are the rules? What is the purview of county council in this new form, this home rule government we've had in place since 2000? And what is the role of the county executive? You know, because I believe, look, when they switched from the 3-commissioner system to the home rule government and the county executive, it was with the intent to avoid a lot of the problems they had with the county commissioner system when they had 3, okay? I don't think the people of Allegheny County have elected 15, which is essentially what county council is trying to be if they want to try to micromanage county operations through legislation. Just can't do it.
I was going to ask you about that. So you are convinced that it is worth the legal fight and the expense it's going to come, not only from the county executive, but also from council members that are going to want to fight this as well, to lay claim and lay hold to their own authorities. This is a battle that's worth waging, and one that's worth spending, who knows, ultimately how much money on as well.
No, I think it is. I mean, look, you know, the outgoing county executive, Rich Fitzgerald, I mean, he could certainly just walk away from this and not worry about it because he has 6 months left to go in his term.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But for the institution itself and for future county executives,
Yes.
since this county, this body that's there today is insisted on trying to push this
Mm-hmm.
at this point, I think it's well worth the expense for the county to put to bed, any doubts.
Yeah. You also have to wonder if it's going to accomplish. You have to wonder if it's going to accomplish very much, considering there is a distinct possibility. In fact, it's probably more likely than not at this point that another Democrat is going to become Allegheny County executive, and that Democrat is very much in line with the majority that pushed this on us, that would then say, no, I'm going to end the lawsuit and allow this to stand, and actually weaken their own position as county executive in order to continue what you talked about earlier as that virtue signaling. We were talking also about the previous guest that I've had on. I've had on Rich Fitzgerald on, in fact, for my opening show, and he talked a bit about what his hopes and concerns are for Allegheny County and this entire region. And so much of what we're talking about right now kind of reminds me of that conversation that I had with him. So another podcast to go back and take a listen to. That was on May 15th, Allegheny County Executive Rich Fitzgerald joining us. Once again, Sam DeMarco making time for us on Mangino Talks. Sam, I want to thank you for joining us this afternoon. Do appreciate that.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Once again, Sam DeMarco, County Council Member at Large in Allegheny County, joining us on Mangino Talks. And thank you for listening to the Mangino Talks podcast. New episodes drop Monday through Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern. For more on me and the show, be sure to visit manginotalks.com. Follow me on your favorite social media platform by using @ManginoTalks, or you can just Google Mangino Talks. And once you find me, please like, follow, subscribe, and share the pages with your friends and your family. And thanks again for listening to the Mangino Talks podcast.